They're the people you thought you knew and the people you want to know more about. The all-new Biography channel. Step out of your life and into the lives of movie stars and moguls. From their most dramatic on-screen performances to the untold drama of their lives.
Every night, you could live another life.
Movies, biographies, and documentaries 24 hours a day. The Biography channel. Call your cable operator or satellite provider.
Two young Americans face one another in the desert heat of Afghanistan. On the left, John Walker Lindh, dubbed the American Taliban, now facing the next 20 years behind bars.
John loves America. We love America. John did not do anything against America.
Facing Walker Lindh is CIA Special Agent Mike Spann. Minutes later, he became the first American to be killed in combat in Afghanistan.
We are very proud of our son, Mike, and we consider him a hero.
A dusty prison fortress in northern Afghanistan is the last place you might expect to find a fellow American. But that is exactly where CIA officer Mike Spann came face to face with a bearded 20-year-old from California, John Walker Lindh. Minutes later, Spann was dead, killed by other prisoners in a bloody prison revolt. Walker Lindh, who has admitted supporting the banned Taliban organization, is now in an American prison, awaiting sentence. He may spend the next 20 years behind bars. November 25th, 2001. The bloody battle in the fortress in Mazar-e-Sharif in northern Afghanistan between Taliban prisoners and their Northern Alliance captors was a defining moment in America's war on terror. For two young Americans, this battle would bring them to the attention of the world. John Walker Lindh returned home a notorious figure. He has been denounced as a traitor. His mother has spoken out to defend her son.
My love for him is unconditional and absolute, and I'm grateful to God that he has been brought home to his family.
Mike Spann also returned home. For him, it was to a hero's funeral with full military honors, attended by his proud but devastated parents.
Mike loved America. He is a hero, but in my heart, he'll always just be my son.
How did these two American boys end up taking such very different paths? Paths that would end with one man dead and the other facing the next 20 years in prison. The New York Times has extensively covered the stories of CIA agent Mike Spann and John Walker Lindh. Their reporting has been coordinated by national editor Jim Roberts.
I think after September 11th, it would be hard to startle the public with just about anything. But I think that the fact that these two men wound up together in the same place in this part of the world that many people had never even thought of was an extraordinary event. It was something that was incomprehensible in some ways.
Each man's journey began many years before, as they grew up in different parts of the United States. Winfield, Alabama, 90 miles from Birmingham, is a close-knit community with a population of around 4,000. Mike Spann was born there in 1969, the first of 3 children of Gail and Johnny Spann.
His Christian values were very important to him. Those never wavered. He was very dedicated to what he believed in, right and wrong, and he always stood up for that.
When you have a child, especially a son, the first one, you're thinking, okay, what's he going to be like when he gets grown? What's he going to be able to accomplish? What is he going to be able to offer back to society?
4 generations of the Spann family have grown up in Winfield. It's a quiet town, governed by a traditional mix of religion, patriotism, and old-style family values. John Walker Lindh grew up in a very different world, thousands of miles from Alabama. This is the affluent community of San Anselmo, on the west coast of Northern California. This is the former home of John Walker Lindh.
He had a very privileged upbringing, no two ways about it. He was in a family that obviously cared a lot for him, but gave him enormous freedoms. And they seem to have encouraged him quite a bit to make up his own mind.
The Walker Lindh family, on the advice of their lawyers, declined to be interviewed by investigative reports.
There are so many similarities between these two men. Both of these men made significant choices in their lives that put them there. This young man from Alabama chose to go into the military, chose to serve his country. That the other man made some other choices as well. He chose a religion, but he chose more than that. He chose to pursue it to the nth degree. He chose to pursue it overseas, and at some point he became politicized in the process, and that led him to the battlefield.
John Walker Lindh was 10 years old in 1991 when the family moved to San Anselmo in Marin County from Washington, D.C., where Frank Lindh had worked in the Justice Department. Marin was the birthplace of the 1960s do-your-own-thing lifestyle.
His parents were fairly traditional, though. Franklin was a corporate lawyer. His mother was a stay-at-home mother who dabbled in photography.
The New York Times San Francisco bureau was headed by Evelyn Nieves. She has interviewed the parents of John Walker Lindh and traced his early life.
I don't think his parents can quite get over the fact that the country hates their son. They don't believe he's a traitor at all.
The Walker Lindh parents named the second of their three children John, after murdered pop star John Lennon. As a young boy, John Walker Lindh was a bit of a loner. He didn't really mix with the other children in his neighborhood, preferring to play the flute and surf the internet on his computer.
When I spoke to his father, he said his son was never interested in football, never interested in sports, was always a little bookworm. They were very proud of their son. They thought that he was destined to be something great.
Walker Lindh's parents told the New York Times they believe their son has a lot in common with Mike Spann.
They were in the same boat. Both of them had sons who were victims of this uprising. Both of them had sons who were committed to something and, became victims of it.
In Alabama, Mike Spann was raised in a more conventional world of traditional religious values. His elementary school teacher, Odine May, remembers the young Mike well.
I found Michael to be goal-oriented. He knew what he wanted to do, and he had the stickability to do it.
Mike Spann grew up surrounded by reminders of patriotic Americans willing to give their life for their country.
We are a God-fearing town. We are very patriotic. That is shown because many of our boys choose to enter the military or some branch of service, and we're just common religious people.
When Mike moved on to junior high school, he remained an average student. But even as a child, he was not afraid to stand up for what he believed in. His teacher then was Deborah Weeks.
He kind of got into a little bit of trouble during break, and he hit one of the students and knocked him out cold. But that was just Michael. He was always in on whatever was going on. He was part of it. He made sure that he was there.
John Walker Lindh's experience in school was quite different. In 1996, his parents allowed him to enroll in the unorthodox Temescal High School, but the emphasis was on encouraging each pupil to find their own way.
It's not a school for students who can't make it in other schools, but for students who actively choose their path early.
The teenager would spend hours alone on his computer, swapping messages with other teenagers, obsessed with black street culture and hip-hop music.
John, I guess, was a fairly typical teenager when he was 13 and 14 and listening to hip-hop music the way all teenagers listen to hip-hop music.
Even at this age, there were signs of a desire for self-transformation. In one email, the white Californian teenager pretended to be black and complained about racial intolerance. Our blackness does not make white people hate us. It is their racism that causes the hate. Walker Lindh was beginning to develop an interest in a different religion than those practiced by his Catholic father and Buddhist mother.
The references in hip-hop music to Islam converged at a time when he was studying religions and learning about different ways of spirituality.
When Mike Spann was a teenager, he also stood out from his peers with a similar single-mindedness to that shown by John Walker Lindh.
Many of the press accounts have described Mike Spann as the son that many parents want their child to be, and the young man they want their sons to grow up to be. By the same token, he does seem to be almost a stereotype of himself, in the sense that he was an incredibly single-minded achiever.
The dedication and commitment were clear in Spann at an early age. It was a quality that made its mark on his best friend, Randy Sanders.
Well, Mike, he was smaller than most people in our class, but he was just a tough guy.
But he was just 14 years old. Mike told Randy that he was intent on serving his country as a U.S. Marine.
Marines are portrayed as being tough men, and I think as a high school kid, that's probably one of the reasons he wanted to go, because they were elite, and he felt that that's what he would enjoy doing more than the other services.
After high school, Mike enrolled at Auburn University. In 1992, he got married and graduated the same year with a degree in criminal justice and law enforcement. That summer, he also enrolled in the Marine Officers Training School in Quantico, Virginia.
It was a very proud day because Mike was so proud. He was standing tall, and he was so proud he was a Marine.
While proud of her son's chosen career, Gail Spann feared what it might lead to.
I didn't want my children to be going to a war. I didn't want their lives to be put in danger as a mother. And Mike was determined that he wanted to do that.
In 1996, when he was just 15 years old, John Walker Lindh's interest in Islam had developed into a commitment that would change his life. Walker Lindh began visiting mosques in Mill Valley, California. The teenager first met moderate mainstream Islamic figures like Ibrahim Nana.
The first time John came, he was about 16. What was different about him was that he came with his mind already made up. It was the first time he came, and he's already decided he was going to be a Muslim. He had no doubts.
At the same time that John Walker Lindh was beginning to embrace Islam, a new and frightening fundamentalist brand of the Muslim faith was emerging thousands of miles away. It combined religious extremism with a violent hatred for all things Western, and especially for all things American. Images like these shocked and infuriated patriotic Americans like Mike Spann.
I remember us watching TV and seeing things like that happen, you know, and it really upset him.
By the mid-1990s, Mike Spann was a captain in the Marine Corps. His platoon lieutenant was Chris Graves.
Mike clearly was conservative, without a doubt. He was unabashed about this, and he never had any problems expressing it. I think at the core of Mike was his integrity. That's at least what I liked about him the most. He could not be compromised for his honor, and he held that above all, almost like a Southern gentleman in a way.
By now, Mike Spann was married with 2 young daughters. He believed the best way he could defend his loved ones from harm was by taking up arms for his country.
Mike was of the opinion that, you know, he had children and he had a family, and it was up to him to be sure that they were safe and to make the world that better place to live, because not only was it for everybody else, but it was for his family also. And he felt an obligation, like he felt it was a personal obligation to do the things that he was trained to do.
John Walker Lindh's parents fully supported his new commitment to Islam.
His mother Marilyn even helped him attend daily prayers at the local mosque or masjid.
His mother actually used to drop him off to the masjid because he didn't have a license at that time, or I guess he wasn't even old enough to drive.
Ibrahim Nana's son Abdullah befriended the young convert.
I remember the fact that he was a white American who would become Muslim was actually something amazing for us, something we looked at as special.
I was very happy that they were spending time together, because there's many ways for teenagers to go away from Islam, to go away from Allah, and to get misdirected into evil things like drinking or drugs.
As John Walker Lindh was developing his interest in Islam, his home life was beginning to fragment. His parents separated, and it's been reported that his father began living with another man.
Some children, introspective children, particularly if their parents are going through a divorce, might start questioning a lot of things, questioning wealth, possessions, material goods.
Islamic studies lecturer Dr. Hatem Bazian, who met John Walker Lindh at a mosque in Oakland, says the Muslim faith has an obvious appeal for young people looking for stability and order in their lives.
Islam does provide a structured lifestyle, and I would say that somebody who might be lacking that structure in their life, Islam becomes an appealing religion to join.
In 1997, when John Walker Lindh was 16 years old, he began wearing traditional Islamic clothing and told his family and friends that he wanted to be known by his new Muslim name of Suleiman.
He had a beard from before. He continued keeping his beard. He started wearing also Islamic headgear. So, and definitely, I did notice a change. Slowly, he becoming more committed.
In San Francisco, Islamic moderate Suleiman Ghali remembers the young Walker Lindh coming to his mosque.
We American Muslims, we come here and we wanted to just be part of the society. We want to look like, our neighbors, and we want to speak like them and eat like them and behave like them. We would, we don't want to be noticed by the way we look, but we want to be noticed by the way we believe. I think he wanted to be noticed by maybe both, the way he looked and the way he believed.
In November 1998, John Walker Lindh went a stage further to prove his commitment to his new beliefs. He told his parents he wanted to travel to Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula to further his studies. He was 17 years old.
I don't think 17 is very unusual. He is still in his early year of exploration. Even in the U.S., we know that kids, when they hit 17 and 18, the first thing they think is trying to identify a university as far away from home as possible in order for them to get away from the home setting.
Walker Lindh traveled to Yemen with his parents' blessing. They later told reporters they were surprised by the public's reaction to their allowing their teenage son to go to such a faraway place.
Because as far as they were concerned, they were being good parents. They allowed their son, who was an intellectual from early on, to pursue his passions, his intellectual quest, his spirituality. And if it took him to Yemen, so be it. They rationalized that a lot of students go away to school anyway, and so if the school happens to be in Yemen and not Harvard and not Cambridge, what was wrong with that?
But Walker Lindh's commitment to Islam coincided with a time when Islamic extremists were stepping up their terror campaign against American targets.
In 1998, the world began to change quite a bit. We had a very direct encounter with terrorism in 1998 when we now know bin Laden's organization attacked 2 United States embassies in Africa on the same day.
The American embassies in Africa were attacked by suicide bombers controlled by Osama bin Laden. Nearly 300 people were killed. It was a clear sign of what was to come.
That was a very direct contact that this country had with terrorism. And it coincided pretty much with John Walker Lindh's journey overseas. So as he's delving very, very deeply in the world of Islam, the United States is coming face to face, in the worst possible way, with terrorism.
Throughout the 1990s, as John Walker Lindh embraced Islam, an extreme fundamentalist version of the Muslim faith was gaining ground around the world. At its heart lay a hatred of everything America stood for. It was a threat Mike Spann, the Marine officer turned CIA special agent, was determined to face head-on.
By 1998, after 8 years in the Marines, Mike Spann was straining at the leash to put his training to good use.
Mike needed more. Mike needed to feel that he was contributing more to his country.
In June 1999, Marine Captain Mike Spann joined the Central Intelligence Agency.
And I think he felt pressure that the United States was being pressured from outside forces. I think he wanted a more aggressive cycle of going overseas. The agencies he was looking at needed to be very proactive.
In April 2000, Mike, who was divorced and had 2 daughters from his first marriage, met another CIA agent on a training course. He married Shannon and soon had a new arrival, baby Jake.
Mike had the most strongest sense of duty of anyone that I have known, and duty to the ideals that America stands for. He felt a strong sense of duty to our family, really, to provide for us emotionally and physically, and certainly a strong sense of duty towards God.
Spann was soon traveling the world on secret military operations for the CIA.
Mike Spann was a very physical person. He was involved in a very physical organization. He could have done many other things for his country, but he chose the route of greatest risk, and what he also thought the route of greatest return. And I also believe that Walker probably did the same.
At the same time, John Walker Lindh was also traveling to some dangerous and faraway places. His mission was to find the purest form of Islamic teaching. In February 2000, after spending a few months at home with his parents in California, Walker Lindh returned to his studies in Yemen. A few days before his 19th birthday, he wrote in an email to his mother, "I don't really want to see America again." In October that same year, Islamic terrorists allied to Osama bin Laden crashed a boat packed with explosives into the USS Cole while she sat at anchor in a Yemeni port. 17 young American sailors died. His father wrote to Walker Lindh expressing his horror about the attack, but the Muslim convert's response showed that his worldview had now changed dramatically.
In emails to his parents, he suggested that the embassy bombings in '98 were some part of an American conspiracy. A couple of years later, after the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen, which killed a number of American sailors, he saw justification in that attack.
The California teenager turned Muslim told his father the USS Cole should never have been in Yemen, and said the American warship's presence in a Muslim country was an act of war.
John Walker Lindh's journey to Yemen in the initial stage is understandable. The question becomes when he returned to the U.S., did he meet with somebody in Yemen that increased his interest in Pakistan, which for me it seems to be the case.
In April 2001, Walker Lindh left Yemen for the northern districts of Pakistan, a breeding ground for Islamic fundamentalism and the home base for a variety of anti-American terror groups.
John Walker Lindh's journey from Marin County to Pakistan not only was a journey of thousands of miles, but it was a journey into a totally different universe. Gone were the green lawns and opulent homes that people lived in. There were no fancy cars. He was really going into a world that the vast majority of Americans would never experience.
By the beginning of 2001, Walker Lindh enrolled at this madrasa, or religious school in the northern village of Banu, near to the Pakistani border with Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a country ruled according to the strictest interpretation of Islamic fundamentalism. Many believe the simplistic worldview offered by the Taliban may have had a strong appeal for young and impressionable men like Walker Lindh.
Here's a Puritan state. All the individuals are adhering to the Islamic dress code, to public morality, to adherence to Islamic law in the society, and it's being applied. So it becomes an attraction, and then also they're waging a jihad that I could join and be part of. So it becomes an attraction for individuals who really is making that inclination.
In May 2001, Walker Lindh told his mother he was moving somewhere cooler for the summer. She didn't know he had crossed over into the arms of the Taliban.
He was there fighting, in his mind, the good fight, meaning on behalf of a Puritan state, on behalf of a community that is applying Islamic law, against the Northern Alliance, which was a group of, in his view, group of bandits. They were responsible for drug trade. They were aligned with Soviet Union at one side, allied with India on the other, and therefore for him that was the good fight to engage against the Northern Alliance.
According to the Justice Department, while in Afghanistan, Walker Lindh trained with al-Qaeda terrorists, met with Osama bin Laden, and was told of the plot to attack America on September 11th. His parents and lawyers insist that Walker Lindh never knew of the al-Qaeda plot, and they say he would never have condoned attacking America. But it's clear the quiet young American was prepared to take up arms in defense of his beliefs. The scale of the terrorist onslaught on America on September 11th changed the course of history. The attack would also change the lives of the two young Americans, now on opposite sides, in what would soon become a full-scale war. While the Bush administration took time to carefully consider its response to the September 11th attack, CIA agent Mike Spann grew impatient for action.
He was very adamant about the United States standing up and doing something about it. He said, if my country does not do something about this, I think I'm just going to quit and start coaching.
He didn't have to wait long. The war on terror had begun. For Mike Spann, this was what he had been trained for. This was his time for action, regardless of the consequences.
I remember at the time being struck by his desire once the World Trade Center was attacked. I mean, this was a man, he had other obligations, family obligations, yet he wanted and told his family he had to go overseas.
Shannon Spann knew that Mike would be involved in any American response.
Mike wasn't afraid. I surely was. I mean, Mike had done dangerous missions before, and he'd always come home. This was certainly different because it was a wartime context that he had not been in before.
In the aftermath of September 11th, the Walker Lindh family was anxious too. They hadn't heard from their son in over 6 months. They visited mosques in San Francisco, seeking help.
Marilyn, John's mother, had made an appointment with my son Abdullah to find out whether he knew the whereabouts of John, as she had lost contact with him for over 6 months.
But John Walker Lindh's friend Abdullah hadn't heard from him either.
Actually, we were all concerned because we didn't know whether he's alive, whether he's dead, where his whereabouts were.
The Justice Department says that the weeks following September 11th, John Walker Lindh was with the Taliban in Afghanistan, fighting against the Northern Alliance. At the same time, Mike Spann was also in Afghanistan, working alongside the Northern Alliance close to enemy lines. He was able to keep in regular contact with his wife and family, using a satellite phone.
He said that he loved me, and he said, tell the kids and I love them. And I remember he said, the boy looks good, you know, when he was looking at Jake's picture, so it was sweet. I was really glad he was able to call that day.
On November 21st, Mike spoke to his father and told him he would be coming home soon.
The last time I talked to Mike was on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. He told me that day that he was probably going to get to come home either the first or second week in December, he thought.
In her final conversation with her husband, Shannon had a clear sense of foreboding.
And I remember telling him that I love him, and he did too, and I put down the phone and just burst into tears. And yeah, that was the last time I got to speak to him.
Neither she nor John Walker Lindh's family could ever have imagined what was to happen next. On November 25th, 2001, at a ruined fort in Mazar-e-Sharif, an Afghan cameraman captured the moment when two worlds collided. As Mike Spann from Winfield, Alabama, and John Walker Lindh from Marin County, California came face to face. Walker Lindh had been captured by Northern Alliance soldiers. Suspecting he was American, they brought him to Mike Spann for this interrogation.
Hey, who brought you here?
Walker Lindh, who appears dazed and confused, does not respond. Spann then reminds the Muslim convert of what had happened on September 11th.
Do you know the people you're here? Hey, look at me. Do you know the people that you're here working with are terrorists? They've killed other Muslims.
John Walker Lindh never uttered a word. Moments later, Mike Spann was dead, killed by other Taliban prisoners who suddenly overpowered him in a bloody prison revolt. Mike Spann was the first CIA officer to be killed by the enemy in an American military operation since the Vietnam War.
We saw the small clips of Mike that all America, all the world's seen. And I was very proud of Mike. He acted in a very professional way. And I think he treated them real nice, real good.
Johnny Spann is bitter about the conduct of John Walker Lindh during his interrogation by Mike Spann. Not because of what he did, but what he failed to do.
All that Mr. Walker had to do was tell Mike that I'm an American, I need some help. Y'all are in danger, we're all in danger. We need to get out of here. My son would have given his life to have got him out of there. But as it turned out, Mike gave his life fighting, trying to get out of himself. And John Walker didn't help him at all. And he was an American. And that's unforgivable.
John Walker Lindh's parents told reporters they were shocked, but also relieved by the video of their son's interrogation.
The way they described it to me was a mixture of complete horror and complete relief, because up until that point, they had no idea that their son was alive. For months and months, they didn't know whether he was alive or dead. And so a parent's reaction is, yes, our son is alive. And then, of course, the secondary reaction is, oh my God, look what has happened to him. Look where he is.
Johnny and Gail Spann broke the news of Mike Spann's death to his children.
How do you tell them that their daddy's dead, that he got killed by terrorists, and in with those terrorists that there was an American that could have helped him? It's tough.
I had lost my only son, but at the same time I felt very proud of Mike. He loved our United States of America, and he gave the ultimate sacrifice for it, and he was doing his job.
John Walker Lindh, wounded in the prison revolt, spent the next 7 days in a basement as American planes launched missile strikes at the fort. Northern Alliance soldiers poured water and then burning gas into the basement to flush the defiant Taliban prisoners out. After a week, injured, hungry, and freezing, Walker Lindh and the other surviving Taliban gave themselves up. And for the first time, John Walker Lindh confirmed on camera that he was an American.
What is your name? American name. Huh?
John.
Huh?
John.
Ron?
John.
John. To focus on from where you come. Pakistan. Huh? America. Yes? America.
December 5th, 2001. Mike Spann's family was there to see him return home a hero, with full military honors. His coffin was draped in the American flag he had given his life for. George Tenet, the head of the CIA, was there to pay his respects. Mike Spann was accorded the ultimate military honor, being interred at Arlington National Cemetery.
At Mike's funeral, I wanted that to be a really special moment, mostly because he was just the most honorable person that I've ever met, and I really just wanted to do my best to represent him with the kind of dignity that I think he deserved.
On January 23, 2002, 2 months after surrendering at the fort in Afghanistan, John Walker Lindh also returned to American soil. The American Taliban was flown in the middle of the night and taken to Alexandria Detention Center in Virginia. In February 2002, a clean-shaven Walker Lindh was formally charged in a federal court with 10 counts, including conspiring to kill Americans abroad and working with al-Qaeda terrorists. He faced a life sentence if convicted.
People have said that, Mr. Walker was young and impressionable. Every mind is impressionable. It's what do we choose to allow to impress us the most? Is it truth and honor and virtue and freedom, or is it oppression?
The video recording of the encounter between the American Taliban and the CIA agent Mike Spann was set to be a key element in the trial of John Walker Lindh. An attempt by his legal team to prevent the tape being shown to the jury was rejected by the judge.
I'd ask the Attorney General to not take it out on John Lindh, because in my view, and I'm not going to take any questions, in my view, they have brought up the cannon to shoot the mouse.
His lawyers claim the videotape shows Walker Lindh being questioned execution style at gunpoint, and that he was too frightened to speak. It was also his right under the Fifth Amendment to refuse to answer Mike Spann's questions. His lawyers claimed other incriminating statements made by Walker Lindh to the FBI in Afghanistan were obtained under duress and without legal representation. Disturbing images of Walker Lindh in custody, naked, blindfolded, and strapped to a metal bed were released to the press. But on July 15th, 2002, a surprise plea bargain was struck between the prosecutors and the Walker Lindh defense.
This plea agreement is an important victory for the American people in the battle against terrorism.
Walker Lindh was now willing to enter a guilty plea, but only to 2 relatively minor charges. He admitted carrying a rifle and 2 grenades and fighting for the Taliban. In return for his guilty plea, Walker Lindh's lawyers secured a reduced sentence of 20 years rather than life.
This is a tough sentence. This is an appropriate punishment. And this case proves that the criminal justice system can be an effective tool in combating terrorism.
After the deal was done, Walker Lindh's lawyer, James Brosnahan, tried to explain his client's motivation.
For John Lindh, who accepts this, it represents a clearing of his situation. He forthrightly this morning described what he did to the judge. He was a soldier in the Taliban. He did it for religious reasons. He did it as a Muslim, and history overcame him.
The deal between the Justice Department and Walker Lindh's lawyers means we may never know the truth about how much, if anything, Walker Lindh knew about al-Qaeda and the attack on America. But the deal also means the Justice Department and the FBI will not have to answer potentially embarrassing questions about the conditions under which Walker Lindh was questioned in Afghanistan. For those who knew and loved Mike Spann, there is little sympathy for Walker Lindh.
You know, at the time that he was there, he was very clear about the fact that this extreme version of Islam that he had determined to follow sort of gave him the right and the responsibility to wage jihad against the West.
To focus on from where you come, huh?
America.
Where?
America.
Part of me was infuriated. Of course, the Marine in me would love to get my hands on him, but the American in me knows that justice will have time and the justice will prevail, and that is the better way to do things.
But even though the man the Justice Department once labeled the American Taliban has not been charged with any involvement in the death of Mike Spann, the images of that final fateful meeting may forever link them in the public's mind.
I think people's image of John Walker Lindh for a long time will be the image of the guy crawling out of that basement at the prison, where he did look scared. He certainly looked dirty, but yet he was on the wrong side of the battle, certainly in the minds of many Americans.
Both Mike Spann and Walker would do almost anything for their cause. One was a great defender of our wonderful country. One was what he thought a defender of his faith. And here they meet on this bloody battlefield. Two polar opposites, but they kind of come together.
People like us have made this comparison, of course, to Americans from separate walks of life and how they meet up. It kind of makes me mad that this is becoming Mike's defining moment.
But while Walker Lindh still makes headlines, Shannon Spann is intent on preserving the memory of her husband's sacrifice.
There hasn't been a single day that has passed that I haven't just cried over just how much I miss him. I mean, I have some wonderful pictures of Mike and me, and I just look at that face, and I just think, oh, I wish I could just touch that face, you know.
John Walker Lindh will be in his early 40s when he is finally released from prison. As part of his deal, he has agreed to cooperate with investigators, assist in other prosecutions, and provide information about Al-Qaeda. Mike Spann's name has been engraved on the CIA's Wall of Honor as the 79th agent to give his life for his country.
John Walker Lindh's commitment to the Islamic faith appears to remain strong. As part of the plea bargain, Walker Lindh has asked that on his release he be allowed to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. The U.S. government has agreed. Mike Spann's father has said he wants to testify at Walker Lindh's sentencing hearing set for October 4th to tell the court he still holds the American Taliban responsible for his son's death. Though there is no parole in the federal system, credits for good behavior could mean Walker Lindh is released in 17 years.